Wasn't that a great session talking about the next generation? Now, keeping on a generational theme, now we have a great Q&A with Peter Roper, the family business practice man. Peter is a vastly experienced business management consultant who really just delves really deep. He's an expert and authority on the subject of family business with all the different dynamics that has compared to a normal business. And with farms being predominantly family businesses, we thought it'd be good to catch up with Peter. See you on the call. Peter Roper, long-standing friend of both of ours, who is an expert in, as it says on his little picture there, family business practice. So Peter has gone very, very deep on the differences between a traditionally run business and one owned and run by a family, and the different little eccentricities, quirks, benefits, and consequences all that entails. So, Peter, welcome.
Thanks, Dave. Lovely to see you and Paul as well. Lovely to see you both. Obviously, I've known you for many years, the two of you, and it's nice to have the opportunity to speak to a different community.
Wonderful. Well, they're friendly. They don't bite, but their cattle do.
Well, I'm looking across the fields right now, and the cattle are there, and the sheep are there right now. Well, in fact, the young cattle have just gone out because they've just been taken away. There's more sheep in there at the minute.
So it'll be a bit quieter.
And I am surrounded by farms, where I live in Worcestershire. So
wonderful. So, Pete, start off by, if you will, just by giving us sort of a 90-second, 2-minute potted resume of your background. How have you got to here?
Oh, blimey. As you know, I could talk about that for hours. So in short, I've been in business development for 40 odd years. Yep. I've been working with family businesses. This is my 28th year with family businesses. I've had 6 family businesses of our own, 3 successes, 3 fantastic failures, full well what I've learned more from. I'm famous for a number of phrases. One is about filling the fridge, and that's where family businesses start from. And we are unique. I say we because we are a family business. Paul, you are. Dave, you are. And we think, act, and do differently. No matter what the marketplace is, we work differently. We are not a corporate. I had a decent corporate career till I was 40. And I walked away from all the machinations of that, although I was successful at the time. We are very different the way we think about things. And therefore, that brings its own unique challenges.
You mentioned fill the fridge there. Now, anyone who knows Peter Roper will know that's what he's probably most famous for. What does that mean to the farmers watching and listening to this?
Okay, so I had a successful consulting career up to 2006. I made some mistakes in terms of investment, and in 2007, I lost the lot. So the fancy house, cars, everything disappeared, and we ended up renting a 2 up, 2 down cottage in a village surrounded by farms. And my grown-up kids came to see me, and literally they said, "Dad, the fridge is empty and you're skinned." And they had a whip round, and they gave me some cash and said, "Go to Lidl and go and fill the fridge," and that's where it's from. And that's where most family businesses that's where they're most scared. They're scared to death that the fridge is empty. And it might be a business, but actually they're scared about the fridge being empty. And what happens is as a business grows and then you perhaps employ people, those employees are perhaps members of the family, especially when you get into multi-generation families, which of course I know farms very much are that way inclined. You're filling their fridges. That's the point. You're now filling their fridges as well as your own. And there'll be times when you don't fill your fridge and your fridge is empty, but you make sure you fill everybody else's fridge. And that's a saying that's stuck with me ever since, basically. So that's what a family business is about. And it might grow. It might become multinational. It might be huge. But you never forget the fact that you are responsible for filling everybody else's fridge and hopefully your own.
That is so true, Peter, isn't it? I think, Dave, you'd recognise this, and I see it with a lot of our farming clients, that when the milk price drops, if you're in dairy, or the meat price drops, they tend to focus on, I've got to pay the salaries. And the people that will end up not being paid is often all the family members, not even necessarily just the family owners, but as you say, if the son and daughter, well, you're expected not to take your wage either because we've got to pay all the staff. Yeah. So I think that concept of needing to fill the fridge, and certainly as a business owner myself, and having my son and my daughter now in my business, I resonate with the fact that I've got to fill their fridge as well.
Yeah.
It's extra pressure. It's extra pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, it's extra pressure. I have done myself, and I have spoken to many other family businesses where, they've paid the salaries on a credit card, and thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got 30 days to work it out, and that's what a family business is about. It works in a different dynamic. You will not see what I would call a corporatized business. And I don't mean that unkindly. I just mean it's different. It's just working as a business. It's not got the family business values and stuff. They wouldn't do that. They would just say, look, we're out of money. Let's go get a loan or we'll close the business. Family businesses can't do that. And of course, farmers definitely can't do that. So absolutely, you'll pay everybody by yourself and your suppliers. Yeah, you'll pay your suppliers beforehand, because if you don't, you might stretch things. Most family businesses will talk to their suppliers and say, look, we've got a problem. And because they're normally the ones that are the best payers, I don't say all family businesses are the best in the world, by the way. There are some exceptions. We probably all know them. But in the main, they'll pay the suppliers properly when they're supposed to pay them. So if they've got a real problem, they say, look, we've got a real problem. And those suppliers will help to a degree, because they know they'll come good, because they're not playing what I call the corporatized game. So you've got this big, round robin thing. And don't forget, a high percentage of the business in this country are family businesses. High percentage.
What's the difference then, Peter? How would you talk about the corporate business? What would you say are the 2 or 3 things that are different between a family business and, let's call it, a corporate business, which is basically a non-family business, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are the 2 or 3 things that you would say would be different?
Well, if you looked at the Institute for Family Business, the IFB, they would say that a family business means they've got to have at least 25% of the shareholding of the company to say it's a family business. Well, they would say that because the IFB, is very much interested in larger family businesses. You only have to look at their membership fee to understand that. Sorry if that upsets anybody listening to this recording, but it's fact. It's there. It's plain to see. Governments don't understand family businesses. They understand very large businesses because they're the ones that talk to them all the time. Family businesses, to me, are anybody that's got some sort of family member they talk to about it. So if I traditionally say a family business starts by putting food on the table, you start the business doing whatever it is you're going to do. And if you've got I will say to an audience, have you got a partner? And they'll say, oh yes, I've got a wife or a husband or a partner, whatever. Do you ever talk to them about the business? Oh yeah, regularly. Well, you've got a family business, whether you like it or not. Right. The fact they might not be formally employed in it. Paul, I am sure, in fact, I know that you will have used your kids in labour in your business before they became part of the business.
Popping uncomfortably.
Yeah, but legally and all above board. Yeah.
Legally and all above board, of course. Yes, absolutely. But I mean, if you take our business, our older daughter, Sarah Beth, Dave particularly knows Sarah Beth very, very well. She was working in the business, our business, when she was 8. When we used to do CDs and stuff, she did glue on the CD stackers and stuff. But that's why how family businesses work. And then eventually the kids get involved in it or not, as the case may be, which is a completely different subject. And that's how a family business starts. And from my very limited experience of farms, it's exactly the same thing. The pressure comes to work in the family business because you've been working in it for years. Unpaid labor, in the early days. And then as they grow, do you want a new pair of football boots? Yeah, absolutely. We'll go and do that over the corner.
No, you're right. You're right, Peter. I mean, a lot of the farming clients that I talk to, they'll say their words, they use phrases like, well, I've just grown up in the business. And they have literally, again, it's not always legal, but to have anybody under the age of 13 on your farm, just to be absolutely clear on that one. But children will help out. Whether it's lifting stuff, and you're right, and that's not that. Whereas that wouldn't normally happen if you're working in an accountancy practice, large accountancy practice, you wouldn't necessarily bring your kids in to the office to give you a hand on school holidays. Whereas in farms, absolutely, that's what happened. So, what else is the difference between a family business and a corporate business? Is there anything to do with the way it feels or the way it operates?
Yeah. I mean, to me, the number one is values.
Right.
To me, that it's all about values of the business.
Explain, Pete. Explain.
Yeah.
Well, A family business stands or falls by the values it portrays on a day-to-day basis. So therefore, it's the values that the family portray that actually make that business tick, makes it work. It is likely, both of you understand and know and serve people with how to look at values. It is likely that the family has similar values, so therefore it goes into the business that their values are there in a certain way. Corporatized businesses, and I don't mean they're necessarily a big corporate. I mean they're a business where it's a group of people who get together to do some business, to make some money and pay salaries and pay whatever it is that they'd like out of that business. Values are a secondary consideration. The first consideration is does this thing work, and do we all make money out of it? And I'm sure with farmers it's the same, but certainly with family businesses I've worked with, which is literally thousands. It's values first. It's always values first. And
how does that impact them operationally then?
They probably take less money. That's the first thing. They probably give people more license. They work a lot closer with their client base. They tend to know their client base better. They tend to know their suppliers better. Relationships, particularly over a period of time, are longer. Certainly when you get multi-generational family businesses, the youngsters will say, how the hell does dad know all those people? Well, the fact is, over years, those relationships have formed, but they've formed in a way that's very different to a corporatized business. Whatever people say, corporatized business is an intent on being more transactional and less relational.
Yeah,
that's what it boils down to, and it's not a criticism at all. It's just a different way of life. That's all. And so, which is why people come from those more corporatized, transactional-based businesses. They come into family businesses. They either sink or they swim, and a lot of them sink. They don't really get it. They don't really get the whole ethos of that. They do. They really take to it, and it's great. Interestingly, if you look at lots of statistics, you will see things like employee retention in family businesses is always higher, always higher.
It's true.
Yet they tend to be paid lower. They tend to work harder and longer.
A vocation.
They stay. So you've got to ask yourself, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you go and get a higher salary and have less aggro and work less? Why wouldn't you do that? And the answer, it's got to be values, hasn't it? It's got to be the values of that family ethic, which you either buy into or you don't. Like I said, not all family businesses are great, but the vast majority, that's what people buy into. And because they buy into, they all work together closer.
So Peter, have you worked, this is, I've got a self-interest in this situation because I've got a family business that's growing, but I can think of a lot of farmers as well, where they have this situation where it's the family, then they start to move to employees. So with the clients that you've worked with, how have those families that have made the transition from, as you say, a very relationship-led business, but they have to become more corporatized because they're growing and they're bigger. Yeah. How do you hold on to those family values as you grow?
Well, it's hard is the answer. It depends how they do it. I have another phrase I use is professionalize, not corporatize.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that's the truth. You want to professionalize a bit. You're getting bigger. You've got to professionalize, whether you like it or not. You're going to have to. But don't corporatize the business. Don't lose the very thing that's created. That you see so often businesses, you see the whole entrepreneur thing, and they say, the thing about entrepreneurs, they get to a certain size, they can't handle it anymore, and they clear off and they flogged it to a bunch of venture capitalists who then turn the business into something else. You see that over and over again. Well, that doesn't work with family businesses. It never works with family businesses. So if the family business is going to retain that business, but it's growing, therefore it's got to put professionalism in place. I always remember interviewing some years ago the MD of Western Cider, which is Helen Thomas, and Helen is the fourth of what is now 5 generations in Western Cider. It's 160 years old, something like that now.
Wow.
And that comes, of course, from a farming background. Absolutely. And the phrase she said to me one day really struck home with me years ago when we were filming her, actually, which was, I'm just a custodian of this business, Peter.
Lovely. Yeah.
And that's the point. If you're growing, I mean, they're a decent sized business, but they're still family oriented. Still, and they've still, I think one of the examples she gave me was one of their drivers been with them for 30 years, couldn't quite handle it anymore for various reasons. So they found him another job inside. They were never going to let him go. And he's probably still working now, and he's probably 90 or something, right? But it's because I forgive anybody who's listening to this if I got it wrong, but you can see the principle. They stay together, so the business stays family oriented, but it has to professionalize. Because it gets bigger, you just have to.
Now that has positive and sometimes negative consequences, because you've got the family loyalty to keep the unit there, and when it works and it's gelling and it's clicking and everything's working properly, then productivity is good, profits are good, results are good, family get on, they're cohesive. Then there are other situations where perhaps they're working out of obligation. Now, it sounded like Helen did it out of a sense of love and appreciation. Custodian, great word. You don't use that unless your values driven. And then I know some young farmers around here, for example, who don't necessarily want to work on the family farm and they feel obligated to. So what are some of the positive and negative consequences of a family working together on a farm?
Well, I know, and I'm not telling tales out of school because it's on a video I did with her years ago, and it's still on YouTube. She actually ran away and did exactly that. She didn't want to be part of the family business, but eventually came back to it and chose to. I've worked with and I've interviewed lots of next generation. I mean, there's if you talk to the suits, as I would call it, so the solicitors, accountants, etc., they'll always come out with the standard phrase, which is, first generation build, second generation obligated continue, third generation spends the money, or that's the polite version, isn't it? All right, okay, and runs away. There's truth to it, because just because that first generation built that business to fill the fridge, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what they found they could do to fill the fridge, and the next generation comes along, they tend to feel more obligated. Or if it's, I don't know, classic, a couple of brothers, let's say, or a couple of sisters, but where they come into the business and the older one feels more obligated than the younger one.
It's very true in farming. That is, it's frequently the eldest son or daughter that is almost expected. There's like a cultural thing of the next son will take it on. And it's interesting what you said as well there, Peter. I think a lot of the more progressive farmers now reckon, by that I mean those that recognise that we need to professionalise businesses and professionalise the industry, encourage their youngsters, the next generation, to go away for a bit. You talked about Helen, the cider MD. Yeah. She went away, and I notice frequently that those that have done that and then come back often come back more rounded than if they'd just only ever worked in the. Do you see that outside of farming as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's particularly true of the family businesses that are larger. The smaller business, not so easy, but the larger ones can have that viewpoint, which basically says, son, daughter, off you go do your thing. And you may want to come back into the business. If you do, you come back in as a more rounded professional. You've got more experience, you've got life experience, you've got people experience, business experience maybe. But if you come back into the business, there are strings. There are strings to it, whether you like it or not. There are strings to it. There are all the business strings, but you are a member of the family, and whether you like it or not, that brings a different dynamic. So you see certain family businesses that make a mistake, perhaps, where they bring a youngster back into the business, but the youngster has learned everything, so therefore now knows everything about the world, but doesn't know anything about that family business because it moved on.
So true.
Whilst they were away, it moved on. The business that they remembered when they were a kid, it's moved on. So they need to come in at the bottom and be humble and learn and bring the team of people together. Otherwise, you're going to have people inside who are going to say, "Well, I know more about them, but they're getting paid twice as much. I bet they're getting a real bonus at the end of the year because I bet they're going to get the fancy car and all that." You can hear it all. So they've got to come in humble, with appreciation of the fact the situation is different, and that doesn't always happen, unfortunately. I think the other side of that is where a family. Can I share a quick story? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I tend to share this same story over and over again because I just think it illustrates it. So I vividly remember a few years ago, I had a black country couple come to see me. They built a manufacturing business, done well for themselves, classic black country, worked hard, called a spade a shovel, and sat down with me, and they got about 50 employees. And Dad said, we built this as a business, as a legacy for our children. I said, really? Is that right? So you're gifting it to them, are you? It's a legacy. And no, we're not doing that. No. So you want them to keep on working to keep you in your dotage until you pop your clogs.
Yeah.
Wife, who was used to being silent, but that was already laughing at that point. He wasn't used to have somebody talking back to him, basically. And I said, look, let's be blunt. You built the business because you were filling the fridge. You were on your backside when you started. You've worked hard. You've done well. And along the way, you had children that you had to fill their mouths full of food. That's done great. Their sons have now grown up. So the obvious question is if you want your sons to carry on and keep paying you money whilst you don't do any work anymore, they've got to want it. So do they really want it? And he said, well, yeah, absolutely. Of course they do. And I looked at his wife and I said, Mom, is that true? And she said, no. I've been trying to tell him this. Here we go. So what is it? Don't tell me. The older one feels obliged. Yes, he does. Does he really want to do it? The younger one, does he want it? Yes, he does. But he's young and he's inexperienced. All right, so what we need to do is put a plan in place. And over a period of time, that's exactly what we did. The eldest son did what he thought he should do, slowly but surely built things up so that younger son could take over while he was learning. Younger son took over and he's running a great business. Both of them committed an amount of money that would come from that family business to keep their parents rightly in their dotage because they'd built it and they weren't flogging it off to somebody. All right. And the family business continued. But you've got to have a plan. You've got to be open and honest. And what I always say is it's a simple plan. It can be on one piece of paper. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be legal. If it's a good family, you can just refer to it on a regular basis. I would suggest quarterly and just say, anything changed on this plan? We all agree this is what we're doing. Yes. Okay. Let everybody know that's what we're doing. Yeah. Let everybody know what we're doing. And then it's clear. As something comes up and it changes because life changes, then, okay, how does this affect the plan? You keep it as simple as that. And then if you need to do legal stuff, then go see the legal boys, but don't bother otherwise. You don't need to.
Yeah, we would say the example you just gave there is so applicable for farming businesses. That story of a black country business could be a Worcestershire farm. It could be a Scottish farm, a Welsh farm. That scenario you described of the eldest son feeling obliged and the parents often assuming that's what's going to happen. And then the difficult conversation that says, well, we can't. The difference with farming is you can't often sell the business because you often don't own the land, or if you've got the land, you can't sell it. So there's a real sort of extra tie in farming where you're unlikely to be able to sell it. So it has to be passed on. And therefore, you've got to be able, the sons and daughters have got to be able to keep their parents, using your word, in the dotage they've become accustomed to. That means that suddenly the farm's got to operate differently. So I think everything you said there about having the conversation, getting it on a piece of paper, using tax advisors if you need to, because it can be quite complex in farming on the tax affairs. But I think, would you say, Pete, the first thing is to get the conversation started?
Yeah, that's it. I've been involved too late in a couple of occasions where they got legals involved too early. Then it went completely pear-shaped. Particularly the one I always think of, where I had a dad literally crying, saying, "All I want is my son back," and it was too late. They fell out in a big way and never to come back. And that's because they got legal beavers involved on either side. I'm not criticizing legal beavers, right? But they were looking out for their two clients. And those two clients they hadn't had a proper conversation. What you
Yeah.
do is I can tell you now that on Saturday we're having an AGM of our family business, which means our son in America is going to come in, on Zoom, and then the rest, the family will be on Zoom as well, and we'll all be talking about exactly that. And he has a career completely outside of the business of the family business, but he's a part of it all the same. And we all just say, look, how's life? What's it about? Is this where we're going? That's what's happening? Yeah, we're all clear about it. Okay. Are there any legal implications we need to think of? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Accounting. Oh, all right. Well, we better get that done. But the plan's the same. We know where we're going, and that's it. And that's what we try and do with clients, which is you don't need fancy stuff if you all understand it. But if you haven't had that proper conversation, or the conversation is, I'll get round to it. I'll talk to our son soon. Yeah, I'll talk to him soon. Yeah, I will. I've got to go do something, which means I ain't going to do it. It's the same. Are you going to talk to son about the facts of life? Yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And because Dad never does. You know what I'm getting at?
Absolutely.
Well, if they do that, and you got a simple plan, and everybody knows it, you just refer to it occasionally, it doesn't have to be complicated, then everybody knows what's going on and you'll get on with life. If it comes to this big roadblock in the middle, then it's a problem. Then it is a problem. And I know from personal experience that not opening my mouth early enough was a dumb thing to do, especially with those closest to you. The other thing you tend to do as a parent is you try and shield your children.
Yeah.
Usually your children know better than you do. That's my experience. I've long since realized my kids know far more than I'll ever know, and they're far brighter than me. So why wouldn't I talk to my kids and say, what do you think? Because I don't know, but you're in the parent situation, aren't you? Well, you're supposed to be the wise sage. How do you say to your kids, look, I'm stupid. What do you think?
Well, Peter, what I'm taking from this is that farmers really should be starting their conversations early, making sure everyone's on the same page, draw up a plan, revisit the plan on a regular basis. Simple as. Now, if I've been quieter in this session than I normally would be, it's because something you said really reminded me of something I heard about 10 days ago in the pub in our little village here. I don't know this farmer, but he was obviously a farmer. He was having a Sunday lunch and I overheard a conversation, and I don't know why it stuck with me, but then you talking about threads, both in the lineage of father to children in the business, but also about farming generally. And I hadn't appreciated it until you said it, and it's made me really think. This farmer was talking about, at the time of recording this, it's October. We've had a more or less monsoon of rain, and this guy was a maize farmer, and he was saying that everything is going to rot in the fields because we can't get on to harvest it. And he said, and the son was kind of, okay, so we'll do it next year. And he's going, no, that has consequences. And he went, oh yeah, okay, so money will be tight. And no, further than that. He said, it affects the soil, it affects the environment, it affects who was going to buy the maize. So there are local cow farmers who are going to be totally dependent on that maize being produced. He said, the consequences of the job we do, and he went on to explain this thread, as you beautifully and eloquently described it, the consequences of relationships between farmer and supplier and customer and within the family and how it could impact them as a family. And I could see this farmer out the corner of my eye actually getting quite emotional. But the beautiful thing was the son got it.
Oh, that's good.
He got it. And it was, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up thinking about it. You could tell in that moment he got it. And communication, something Paul in one of his sessions earlier was going on and on and on about, it's just communicate with the communicate. It all starts with communication. And so, Pete, thank you for your time today. If there was one thing other than the amble that I've just said, if there's one thing that you would advise farmers to do to improve their family business practice, what would it be?
Be open with the family. That's the key. I would obviously say communicate, talk, etc. But it's very easy when you're in a multi-generational family that you go down the route of, dad won't talk about this or mom won't talk about that, etc. And I'm not saying our family's perfect, and there is no doubt that, there are times when we don't do what I'm saying to do. All right, I'm not saying we're perfect, but talking to the family and being open is you're halfway home then. Yeah, at least halfway home, and so as parents, where you think you know everything, or you feel like you're supposed to know everything, it's better to be able to say, "What do you think, kids?" And likewise with kids, with the next generation, with the children, don't expect that your parents know everything. And when you can see that they don't know, all right, don't get frustrated with them. Help them. Don't get the frustration is, mom and dad, don't get frustrated. Just work with each other and communicate. Paul, I know it's a big word for you. That's the biggest thing you can do. That's the biggest thing you can do. I suppose the other thing is, watch out, don't buy too big a fridge, because you have to fill it. I'm off to Aldi later on today, and we'll be filling the fridge. Fortunately, it's not too big. You know what I mean?
That's as a thing to leave us with, Dave. I think that's a very interesting metaphor that Peter's just left us with, because the farming community often think that bigger is better. Grow the business, if we're struggling, just make it bigger. We need more land, we need more cows, and often that just means you've got a bigger fridge to fill. So I think that's a really good point. Bigger isn't always better.
No, definitely not.
Brilliant.
Any last comment, Paul?
No, just how I think, what I think Peter's talked about today. I'm sitting here thinking, I want this to be sent out to most of my farming clients, because the be open thing is a real challenge within the farming community. Mental health is still very poor within the farming community. We don't talk, and us three all know that the importance of being open with your family. I thought that be open. I don't want to top that, really. I thought be open was the best way to finish.
Yeah, Peter, if people want to get hold of you, how best to do that?
Well, the website's familybusinesspractice.com. That's the easiest. All my contact details are on there. Dave, Paul, if they get in touch with you, I know you can get me very easily. So it's dead easy to get hold of me.
Fantastic.
Peter Roper, Family Business Practice, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Just for Farmers today.
And thanks for your time, both.